Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
All right. Good weekend? Yeah, it's hot. Very hot. Hello and welcome to the GSMC television podcast. We're part of the mighty GSMC podcast network, and I'm your non-violent, civil, disobedient host, Howard Fletcher. I am joined, as always, by my trusted engineer, Jack the Black Pug, and we are thrilled, elated, and overjoyed to be here with you once again. It's starting to get humid here in the DMV, very humid. So summer is right around the corner and we're ready for it. And I hope you're ready for the show. If you're new to the show, I'd like to give you a very warm and grateful welcome. Thank you for giving us a try. We know you have a lot of options out there and we aim to please. Stick around. I'm sure you'll hear something that you like. We hope you do. We want you to keep coming back. And if you're one of our loyal return listeners, you know how I feel about you. You are truly the reason that I am here, so let's have some fun today. We have a jam-packed show for you today. American Horror Story has some new things in the works. FX has some things in the works as well. Margot Robbie, she's probably going to be joining the ranks of the big screeners going to the little screen. She has a production company of her own, so she's trying to work a few things. The girl with the dragon tattoo, well, she'll be following Margot Robbie to the little screen as well. And I'll always bring you breaking news. You know, I'm big on that. And today we have some emails, very happy to say. And I'll be recapping last Sunday's second episode of the Starz series, Hightown. So, let's get started now with some breaking news. Police arrested CNN journalist Omar Jimenez and his crew on air early Friday during a live broadcast in Minneapolis, as they covered riots sparked by George Floyd's death, sparking intense outrage, as well as an apology by Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, the top executives at the cable news network. CNN called the arrest a violation of First Amendment rights. The correspondent was taken into police custody, even though he identified himself and he had his media credentials that were clearly visible. Their camera continued to record the events. They kept rolling as any good journalist would. And by 7:40 a.m. Eastern, Jimenez had been released and was back on the air. Governor Walz told CNN that he, quote, deeply apologizes, and he said the arrests were unacceptable. Quote, a CNN reporter and his production team were arrested this morning in Minneapolis for doing their jobs, despite identifying themselves a clear violation of their First Amendment rights. The authorities in Minnesota, including the governor, must release the 3 CNN employees immediately, CNN said in a statement right after the arrest. The arrest came even as a white CNS journalist, that was a bit of a flashback there. I used to work for CNS, which is Capitol News Service. But anyway, let me rewind. The arrest came even as a white CNN journalist, Josh Campbell, was covering the disturbances a block away. Jimenez, who CNN anchors said was both African-American and Hispanic, however, was detained. The arrest of the CNN reporter is likely to exacerbate tensions sparked by the protests in Minneapolis, where participants overnight rallied against the death of George Floyd, an unarmed African-American man, at the hands of Minneapolis police. Minneapolis police officers were seen in footage detaining Floyd, with one officer placing pressure on Floyd's neck with his knee despite protests from Floyd and bystanders that he was having difficulty breathing. The story has pushed news outlets to pivot from their coverage of the coronavirus pandemic, which has been all-encompassing in recent weeks, which is Very true. I mean, this is a television podcast. This is an entertainment, for the most part, podcast. And that seems like every story I've talked about is connected to the coronavirus outbreak. I'm talking about this because, number one, I'm a journalist and I do care about the First Amendment. And one of the things that I don't touch on a lot in this show, but I will when it comes up, is television news. And this is something that happens when you're out there covering stories, which I've had to do before. CNN, which has for several months aired a 2-hour coronavirus town hall on Thursday nights in prime time in recent weeks, cut that program to an hour so it could expand its coverage of Minneapolis unrest. MSNBC and CNN both aired live coverage of events from Minneapolis overnight, when those networks typically air repeats of their primetime lineups. Speaking on CNN Friday morning after being released, Jimenez said, quote, there seemed to be some confusion, end quote, by police over whether he and his crew were supposed to position themselves. He said that he and his crew had been in, quote, verbal contact, end quote, with police in the area about how to station themselves for coverage. He suggested that a protester ran behind his crew, which put officials on edge and then prompted them to move toward him and his CNN team. In a statement released Friday, the Minnesota State Patrol said its troopers had arrested 4 people, including 3 members of a CNN crew, quote, in the course of clearing the streets and restoring order at Lake Street and Snelling Avenue, end quote. The CNN trio, MSP said, that Minnesota State Police said, quote, were released once they were confirmed to be members of the media, end quote. But CNN took issue with that characterization of events. Quote, it is not accurate. Our CNN crew identified themselves on live television immediately as journalists. We thank Minnesota Governor Tim Walz for his swift action this morning to aid the release of our crew, end quote. Well, again, I start off the show with something that's not necessarily funny and entertaining, but it is something that's going to be it's happening in media. And as we get closer to the presidential election, I think things like this, hopefully not violence and unrest, but news coverage is probably going to be a larger portion of this show. Not on a political front or to talk about politics per se, but because there are going to be campaigns and there's going to be greater expanded coverage on the networks about these things. And if we start having protests in the streets, I'll probably touch on this a little bit on this show. CNN is one of those stations that when something happens, you're going to get 24-hour coverage on it, and unfortunately they're usually disasters. So this is going to be probably for the next week or so, hopefully not very much longer, a big story, this unrest in Minnesota. Hopefully they can quell some of this violence because it's never a good thing. And since I started in news, I will finish up this segment with some more breaking news that's a little bit more happy. A different type of journalist is getting booked on Meet the Press. The venerable NBC News Sunday Public Affairs program will test a 5-week series featuring college journalism students on a panel with the show's moderator, Chuck Todd. The assemblage will take part in one of the program's central rituals, quizzing newsmakers on pertinent questions. New episodes of Meet the Press, the College Roundtable, will be available every Friday on NBC News digital platforms, including NBC News YouTube channel. It will also be on Stay Tuned, the NBC News program designed for Snapchat. Didn't know there was such a thing. And on Peacock, NBC Universal's new streaming video service. Haven't been on Peacock because I'm not a Comcast. I don't have a preview of it. So all you Peacock subscribers out there, please email me at podcasthoward@gmail.com. Let me know how you like it. Launch of the new limited series run is the latest in a suite of programs NBC News has tailored for younger audiences, who often gain access to video and information in ways other than watching a program at a specific day and time on a screen set and in a communal home space like a family room, like we used to when I was a kid. In recent months, NBC News has unveiled a version of its NBC Nightly News aimed at children, available on YouTube, as well as 4 short-form shows distributed by Quibi, the subscription video hub aimed at mobile aficionados. That's why I do not have it. To accommodate the younger journalists who will take part in a virtual panel, Meet the Press will revive its earliest format, in which a panel of reporters, not a single moderator, lobbed questions at politicians and other people in the news. The students will work with Meet the Press staff to shape the conversations in each week's show. Well, that should be interesting, and it'll keep some of these people on the show on their toes, because I think the questions, I don't think I know, the questions that younger people have for people in public service, politicians as we like to call them, are a lot different than those people of my generation and older. So that's something to look forward to. I'll definitely give it a look. I'm from DC, so I'm a news junkie. But next, I am not going to be talking about news. I'm going to be talking about, guess what? The MTV Video Music Awards. So if that was way too square and dry for you, that segment, this next segment should be right up your alley. Go get a drink, and I'll be right back soon. We're going to pay some bills. Thanks for listening.
Want to know the latest and hottest music hitting the airwaves? Don't be left out. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Music Podcast. Keith keeps you on the loop with everything you need to know from pop, rock, hip-hop, and the top 40. And we'll throw in news of your favorite artists, concert and tour dates, and so much more. Listen no further, because this is the gold standard in music podcast.
All right. You remember when MTV had videos? You remember that, Jack. Not anymore, brother. All right, we're back. MTV. That's what I was going to talk about. Music television. Not anymore. It is currently working with numerous government and health agencies in hopes of mounting its annual Video Music Awards live from New York this August. The show is eyeing an August 30th broadcast date, that's almost September, folks, from Brooklyn's Barcade Center, where the Nets play, for its 36th edition of the VMAs, where MTV honors the best in the music video medium and features performances from top charting artists. This is, by the way, this is an aside. By the way, this is when you start to realize that you're getting older. When you see like a commercial for the Video Music Awards and you stop recognizing some of the artists that are going to be on. I mean, now I'm not a total fossil, so I do know some of the artists, most of the artists, actually I've heard of them because I cover media, but I couldn't tell you what they sing. You know, like I know BTS, but I couldn't tell you a BTS song, but I bet you they'll play at the Video Music Awards. Anyway, that's enough of my problems. The plans come as New York City attempts to rebound from the impact of the coronavirus pandemic amid ongoing lockdowns and social distance orders. Now, I don't know, you've probably all seen the shots of Times Square, and I don't know how many of you listening have been to New York. I go quite often, and, you know, I'm old enough to remember when Times Square was seedy, and now the Times Square we have right now, which is like Disneyland. Both times they were crowded, but it's nothing like the crowds today. The crowds with the new fangled, not so new anymore, Times Square, it's always packed. It's like a sea of ants. And now it looks like the I Am Legend, the Will Smith movie. It's like just barren. So be interesting to see what happens when it opens up. By almost September, I would think things will be not back to normal, but definitely not a ghost town. We're exploring with government, this is a quote, we're exploring with government officials, the medical community, and key stakeholders on how to safely hold the 2020 VMAs at Barclays Center on August 30th. An MTV spokesperson tells Variety. That's where I got this. Quote, the health of everyone involved is our number one priority. Additionally, we are working on several contingency plans to bring music's biggest night to audiences everywhere. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I think the VMAs have been at the Barclays Center before. The only reason I know that, let me look this up real quick. Yeah, it was in 2013. I knew that because at that time, Jay-Z owned part of the Nets. And so he was kind of flossing out there with Beyonce, and it was pretty a big deal, I guess, for Jay-Z because he owned part of first he was getting a VMA, and, you know, that's when she really blew up as a solo performer. And then they owned a percentage of the stadium. It was a pretty big deal. Anyway, notable winners from 2019 included Video of the Year for Taylor Swift, You Need to Calm Down, and Artist of the Year, Ariana Grande. Just so you know, I know who they are. Of course, my 90-year-old mother probably knows who they are as well, so that's not saying a whole lot. While a traditional physical production is the goal, according to one source familiar with the plans, that'll be something, I hope so. The network is keeping safety top of mind and exploring virtual performances and an audience-free show among other contingency plans. Now, I would say that if they have an audience, it probably won't be the same capacity audience that they had when they had it in 2013. And I think that's going to be the case for a lot of these arena situations, whether it's an award show or actually the sporting event that place was built to contain. I just think that they're going to space everyone out. So it's probably going to be 50% or thereabouts rather than a complete full stadium. MTV sent out save the date notices to top agents and talent reps this week, indicating the program would move forward in its traditional format. As the industry waits and watches for decisions from top awards, franchises like the Academy Awards and the Emmys, MTV owner Viacom has been tinkering with its branded live events. Sister property, BET, for instance, will move forward with the virtual edition of its BET Awards on June 28th. Celebrating the network's 40th anniversary and the show's 20 years on the air, top stars in Black entertainment, sports, and philanthropy will appear via innovative techniques and artist-generated content. Okay. Well, you know, they may do a Tupac hologram like before, but other than that, they're going to have the taped, I would think. I don't want to sell them short. They may wow us with something I've never seen before. Maybe you guys have seen it. But if they're talking about artists might appear by tape or by remote satellite, that's been done before. And that's what's going to probably have to happen here. The 3-day BET experience, an ecosystem of events. Wow. All right, here's where I'm wah-wah again with me. Because I've been to the BET Awards, and I used to be a part of these types of things. Listen, all these are parties before the event. This BET experience and an ecosystem of events. Why do people have to hype stuff up now? Why does everything have to be like hyped and made to sound better than it really is? Just so that you can like blast out a selfie and say, I'm at the BET experience and I'm in the midst of this ecosystem of events. When back in the day, it used to be, I'm on my third night of partying and we're going to the awards tonight, because that's really what's going to happen, folks. Anyway, that's it for my rant on that. As the domestic epicenter of COVID-19, New York City is grappling with closures in every sector of public life, including entertainment staples like concert venues, sporting events, restaurants, Broadway, and annual gatherings like June's Pride Parade. Damn, the Pride Parade. See, the Pride Parade can still just be the Pride Parade. So I don't know why we need the ecosystem of events in the BET experience, but what do I know? You know what I mean? Both of them are going to go on, as always. And finally, a little breaking movie news. Paramount Pictures has landed Daniel H. Wilson's spec script, The Blue Afternoon That Lasted Forever, from the producers of A Quiet Place, Andrew Form and Brad Fuller. Now, Form and Fuller will produce the movie under their Fully Formed Entertainment banner, which signed a first-look deal at Paramount last summer. When you sign those types of deals, that means that whatever you're developing, they're going to give Paramount right of first refusal to either buy it or let them sell it somewhere else. Now, Wilson adapted his own short story, which follows a single dad and NASA physicist who discovers a black hole that will strike Earth in a matter of days. The problem is that no one, including his colleagues at NASA, believes him, as, of course, the one person that trusts him is his 10-year-old daughter, of course. But that bond is now being threatened by a different force, Eric finds himself trying to save both his relationship with Marie, his 10-year-old daughter, and a populace unwilling to heed his warnings of the impending disaster. Anyway, why am I bringing this up? Because it's a movie. Because I'm going to try to point out movies that I think are going to go straight to streaming. Not because they're bad movies, but because I think now we're going to have a paradigm where going straight to streaming for some movies that are good are going to be the most profitable place for them to be. This plot right here is not anything out of the ordinary. There's a disaster a scientist sees. No one believes him. Only person that believes him is his daughter. But there's also a little subplot that he has about his relationship with his daughter. That's been done a million times. So I don't, unless this has some kind of spectacular special effects or somebody decides to pump $200 million into it, which I don't see Paramount Pictures doing. I think this is going to be a medium budgeted film, and I think it's going to be perfect for streaming. And so I think it either going to go straight to video on demand, or they'll ultimately, someone like Netflix or something will buy it from them, or Amazon. But I think it's going to go straight to video on demand. I will let you know whenever this comes out if I was right or if I was wrong. Next, Gal Gadot is going to make a miniseries, and it ain't Wonder Woman. I'll tell you about that in a second. We'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
All right. You ever watch Linda Carter and Wonder Woman? She was fine, Jack, back in the day. All right. Well, look, Gal Gadot, she is going to be in a miniseries. And the Gal Gadot-led miniseries is about film legend Hedy Lamarr. I don't know a whole lot about Hedy Lamarr. Heard the name several times. I'll watch the series just for even though I know it's a docudrama, so you always have to be very careful when you watch these docudramas about the accuracy of what you're seeing, but at least it'll give me an overview of who the lady was. Now, I got this article out of both Variety and The Hollywood Reporter. The first part of this is out of Variety, and Variety's learned exclusively, according to them, even though The Hollywood Reporter has also found out, that the project is now set up at Apple, this Hedy Lamarr series, and it's a straight-to-series order, but it was previously at Showtime. Now, I want you to know, this is the second show that I've recently reported on that was going to be on Showtime, but it left Showtime to go to another studio. The first time it was RuPaul's Drag Race. Now, in fairness, that show was never on Showtime. It was reported to be going to Showtime, but it's going back to Logo, and then I believe Bravo. But if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, RuPaul, about that. Anyway, this 8-episode series is from writer and executive producer Sarah Treem, and she previously served as the co-creator and showrunner for Showtime's The Affair, which is a miniseries. Well, it wasn't a miniseries. It was actually, I think, 5 or 6 seasons of a series that I did end up watching. And it was up and down. It was much like Homeland to me. Homeland's a better show. But The Affair had great seasons and not so great seasons. Anyway, Gal Gadot is attached to star and executive produce this Hedy Lamarr series. Gadot and her husband, who is apparently her producing partner, Jaron Varzano, will executive produce under their Pilot Wave banner. Yet another actor who has a production company. If you don't have a production company, you're really not in the business, apparently. you better get your ducks in a row and get yourself a production company. Anyway, according to multiple sources, the decision to move the series to Apple was at least partially the result of the relationship between Treem and Showtime deteriorating following Ruth Wilson's exit from the affair. Now, Ruth Wilson, also an excellent actress who, oh, by the way, if you listened to my podcast last week when I talked about Pedro Pascal, someone else who was in that King Lear production was Ruth Wilson, and she was excellent. And I've always known she's a great actress. She left the affair and was not on the last season. I think the last season was the only one she missed. She may have missed the last two. They killed her character off violently. And apparently she had a falling out with Sarah Treem. Now, in December of 2019, Wilson accused Treem of creating a hostile work environment on the set of the Golden Globe winning show, which Treem forcefully denied. Then Treem recently moved to Fox 21 television studios and got an overall deal there in November. And I remember it was very strange the way that Ruth Wilson suddenly left that show. Not that show, like I said, the show wasn't the best television always. But from what I understand in the business, if you can put one of those shows on your schedule as an actor, you want to do it because it's a great source of income. And and she was doing some good acting. I mean, it wasn't like she was embarrassing herself on the show. The writing wasn't even the writing. The writing was good. The plot was kind of ridiculous. That was the problem with the affair. The plot was just unbelievable. But the writing was good and the acting was good and the production certainly was good. But it was kind of weird how she just kind of faded. You know, she left the show. It was no longer an affair. Anyway, Hedy Lamarr will follow the true story of the Hollywood glamour girl, spanning 30 years from Lamarr's escape from pre-war Vienna to her meteoric rise in the golden age of Hollywood, to her fall and eventual disgrace at the dawn of the Cold War. The show will also go into Lamarr's life as an inventor, including one invention that became the basis for spread spectrum technology used today. Now, I knew nothing about this as far as Hedy Lamarr is concerned. I only knew about her, unfortunately, and there are probably a lot of reasons for that, as a Hollywood glamour girl, which, if she was all this other stuff, is a shame that I didn't know that. The notion for the historical drama originated with Godot and Varsano, who then partnered with Littlefield and Treem. The show fits well with Apple's streaming brand so far, which is focused on premium series headlined by major stars. Other current Apple shows include Defending Jacob starring Chris Evans, The Morning Show starring Reese Witherspoon and Jennifer Aniston, and Dickinson starring Haley Steinfeld. Now, I have not watched any of those shows. I did watch Servant, which was the M. Night Shyamalan series that was on Apple, which was very good. I enjoyed it. I planned on watching The Morning Show, couldn't squeeze it in. But as you all know, listen to me on this show, Apple is doing it right. I don't think Apple's going to be a player like, say, HBO Max. But in order to maintain these streaming services, you have got to have good original content. You have to give people a reason to want to pay you to get on your channel. And this kind of stuff would be that. So I got Apple Plus because I got an iPhone 11 and I got a free year, which I think is about to run out. So I might have to buy it from now on. We will see. Maybe I can finagle something with Apple. I've said Apple about 5 times on this podcast. They might as well give me a free year just for that. Breaking news about The Wolfman. Months after Universal successfully relaunched its monster movie universe, or Monster Universe, I just stuck the movie in there, with Elizabeth Moss's Invisible Man, the studio is pushing ahead for Wolfman, which is being developed as a starring vehicle for Ryan Gosling, to be the next movie based on its catalog of iconic creatures. Industry sources say that executives at Universal have been meeting with directors over the past month and could be making a decision soon on who will take the reins behind the camera. While there is no frontrunner at this time, Corey Finley, who recently received rave reviews for directing HBO's drama Bad Education, I'm one of those guys who gave him rave reviews, with Hugh Jackman and Allison Janney, is said to be in the mix for the job. I love that movie. I thought he did an excellent job. There were only a couple of segments in there that were kind of corny and quirky, but it was great. So I think it would be a good project for him. Of course, I don't know how we'll do with horror, but that's a whole other story. Now, Universal had no comment for the trade magazines, or the trade magazines. Let's see, I dated myself again. For the trades that reported this story. Now, it's unknown what the new take on the Wolfman will look like, though it's believed to be set in present times in the vein of Jake Gyllenhaal's thriller Nightcrawler, with an obvious supernatural twist. Now, why they decided to compare it to Nightcrawler, I don't know. Nightcrawler was a great movie, but not supernatural at all. Now, apparently Gosling pitched this to Universal, and his take fell in line with the studio's new vision for its monster movies. Universal had originally planned on creating an interconnected universe with its vast catalog of monsters. However, the studio reassessed after The Mummy with Tom Cruise misfired and decided to move forward with filmmaker-driven projects based on the monsters' legacies, focusing on what made the characters endure over time. Now, I don't see how anyone thought The Mummy was going to be successful. If you saw that movie, you know how terrible it was. I tried to watch it on cable, and I couldn't watch it on cable. So instead of prescribing a mandate that the films be all part of a larger Universal scheme, Universal loosened the restrictions and open sourced it to filmmakers to create their own unique stories, which I think makes sense. I mean, I don't know why they didn't do that in the first place. For example, The Invisible Man cost $7 million to make and earned $122 million at the box office before movie theaters were forced to close due to the coronavirus pandemic. And it was like in the middle of its run. The Invisible Man could have made approaching $200 million on a $7 million investment. Now, I do wonder how much they paid Elizabeth Moss for that, because they're going to pay Ryan Gosling more than $7 million. And I'm not trying to compare his star power to hers, but Elizabeth Moss has paid her dues. And this just shows some of the inequity of the compensation of actresses compared to actors. Anyway, I brought this up because this is another movie I think is going to go straight to streaming, not because it's going to be a bad movie, because it's going to work for the economic model now. Now, if people go streaming back to the theaters, I'm obviously wrong. It'll go in the theater. But I think if they can make this a $7 to $10 million budget movie, then they'll go straight to streaming, and they'll make probably about $122 million like they made on Invisible Man. If people go to the theater, they could make the over 200 like Invisible Man was probably headed to do. But I think it's going to go streaming unless people go back to the theater. I'm not going back anytime soon, but you might. Next, I am going to talk about the Emmy Awards. This is a TV podcast, and the Emmys have not decided what they're going to do yet. We'll be back in a moment. Don't go away.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's GSMCpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right. You gonna watch The Wolfman? Did you see Benicio del Toro's Wolfman? Yeah, it was terrible. The Television Academy and ABC are getting closer to announcing how this year's Emmy Awards will be presented. Insiders confirm that there'll be more clarity on the telecast by next month. Now, normally by this time, an Emmy producer will have already been hired, with plans underway for the September telecast. A host is usually announced by this point, except for last year, and that's because of the Kevin Hart thing. They didn't know what in the world was going to happen. And the Emmys ended up going without a host at all. Jeez. Of course, this year's Emmy plans, like everything else, have been sidetracked by the COVID-19 pandemic. That led the TV Academy to push back the first round of voting to July, and the nominations announcement by 2 weeks to July 28th. But the actual primetime Emmy Awards remain scheduled for September 20th, and the event is still moving forward as planned. Again, I said this a few months ago when I talked about this. They're going to leave that date and so they can continue to sell ad time. Because if they pull that date, advertisers aren't going to be willing to put up the money. Rod Mills, ABC's Senior VP of Alternative, Specials, and Late Night, now that's a heck of a title, confirmed to Variety and The Hollywood Reporter that the show will go on, but says there's no update on the telecast just yet. Quote, other than they're going to happen in some way, shape, or form. But we have a little bit of time. Because we have the benefit of time, it's much easier to figure it out. I don't know what they'll look like, but they will happen, unquote. Mills noted that unlike the question facing the Academy Awards, given the closure of theaters across the country and the cancellation of film festivals that usually serve as a road to the Oscars, there's no issue whether there will be a shortage of content to recognize. It's quite the opposite, actually, in this era of peak TV, where there's arguably too many shows for consideration. I mean, I don't even know they're going to be like a whole host of people that are going to feel like they got snubbed unless they break it down in some other specific way. The Motion Picture Academy has had a harder time because movie theaters are shut down and they're figuring out how features are going to get released, Mills said. Quote, the Emmys are still going to happen, but we still don't know what they're going to look like because we just don't know where the winds are going to blow in the next few months, end quote. Oh, thank you, Mills, for telling us that. Yeah, well, I mean, I will say it's unclear what TV events are going to look like by September. I mean, everyone's slowly relaxing stay-at-home regulations. But MTV, though, they drew up plans. I talked about this last show. They're drawing up plans to broadcast its annual Video Music Awards on August 30th from Brooklyn's Barclays Center. How it plans to do that's unclear. But the sign that the producers are looking to broaden the scope of the productions in the coming months beyond the mostly at-home remote programs that have been the staple of quarantine TV. Now, again, I don't know what they're going to do other than here is Billie Eilish coming straight from her living room singing, or here's Lady Gaga coming from an empty Madison Square Garden, that type of thing. But we've seen that all before. That's nothing new. And I don't know if they're going to have people in the Barclays Center. If they do, they'll probably be half full, like I said before. More immediately, most upcoming award shows are still relying more on celebrities and others participating from their homes, as I just said, including the upcoming remote Daytime Emmy Awards. Can't wait for that. On June 26th on CBS. A virtual edition of the BET Awards is going to be on June 28th, and a special edition of ESPN's ESPYs is on June 21st. Man, talk about, now they just said they have a hard time with awards for the Academy Awards because there haven't been any movie theaters open. The ESPYs are going to be even worse. I mean, even more challenging, I guess. Because, I mean, my God, not a lot of the leagues shut down in the middle if they even got started in the first place. ABC has had plenty of experience in remote telecasts, including American Idol, which was produced from 45 different locations when it returned with its virtual editions last month. Jimmy Kimmel Live comes from Jimmy Kimmel's house, and 2 Disney sing-along specials, the second of which featured more elaborate effects than the first. I have no kids, so I didn't watch the Disney sing-along special, although I know a lot of adults did and sang along with their significant others and whoever. I didn't happen to watch those shows, and I can't sing very well, so I guess there was a reason for that. Given his position as ABC's late-night host, Kimmel could very well take the helm of this year's Emmys, either from his house or a closed soundstage, depending on what the show winds up doing. That is a golden gig. Can you imagine? Because I wonder how much they'll pay him to be the host of the Emmys from his house. Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, here's BTS. And then you can go up and, like, whatever, eat a sandwich or something and come back and say something else. Whether the Emmys would move forward with telecasting from its normal Microsoft Theater location seems unlikely right now. But again, a lot can change before September, and MTV's bold VMA attempt might trigger others to do something similar. It's also unlikely that a ceremony would take place in front of an audience, as Hollywood notables aren't likely to be ready to rub shoulders at this point. Wow. Quote, I think we're all pretty used to being in our sweatpants, and I think it would be very hard to imagine us getting all dressed up, said one producer. Well, Yeah, that's probably true for the producer. I imagine a lot of these stars, they seem to like the red carpet. They certainly get all dolled up for it. So I don't think that'll be a problem for the talent. Whoever winds up hosting the show, along with the presenters joining in, either at socially acceptable distances or via virtual means, will have to strike the right tone for the night. But producers contacted by Variety, that's where I got this paragraph, also agree that they think an Emmy telecast could come at the right time to both serve as communal virtual gathering, perhaps with a charitable component, and a way to celebrate the entertainment and the people who made those programs that helped get everyone through these rough times. That's a good point. I know, everyone I know, they've all had different experiences while we've been locked down, but one common denominator seems to be they watch more television than they ever have at any time in recent times. So, quote, I imagine that like my family, a lot of other families are watching TV together in a way that they haven't in a while, said one producer, end quote. Think of the kind of positive things that TV has brought us in terms of not just entertainment, but also information, and how it's something that people have relied on. It does feel like that's something that we all could be tapped into for the ceremony as well. It can focus more on what we've all been through rather than just the normal celebration of television, end quote. Yeah, you're going to have to get creative with it, that's for sure. I know that I stopped watching a lot of award shows a long time ago. I watched the Academy Awards because I go to a lot of movies. That's obviously changed. So I don't think that I don't know what I would watch. I probably won't watch these Emmy Awards, but maybe I will since I do this TV podcast. Seems like that would be appropriate, huh? I think they should use it as a celebration of television, but they should also maybe look to open up some different categories, because with the streaming thing and now the social distancing thing, you're going to have a lot of things coming over the television, maybe not through commercial television or traditional television. It'll be streamed that we just haven't had before. They're going to be streamed. Now, they're streamed concerts, but they weren't done as a matter of a tour. Although it makes a perfect sense that if you could stream, if a band could only play one set or one performance, or maybe 3 performances rather than tour the world, it would probably be a lot easier on them. But, not only will we, see movies that are going to be streamed, but I think sporting events and also concerts and things that would be shown in venues like that will start to be streamed. And so it seems like the normal translation would be for the Emmy Awards to have categories for those types of productions. So we'll see what happens. Next, I'm going to have some breaking news for you, and then I'm going to finish up with the latest episode of Billions on Showtime. So go get some snacks. I'll be right back. Thanks for listening. Don't go anywhere.
Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Together we dive into the world of sci-fi and science fiction. From episodes of Star Trek, Star Wars, to The Walking Dead, Resident Evil, all the hot new science fiction movies from the backdoors of Marvel or DC. The Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. You'll never look at science fiction the same way again.
All right. Ready, Jack? We're back. I'm recording this on Sunday, May 31st. And this isn't a political podcast, but over the past few days, there's been a lot of unrest in our country because of a police incident that happened in Minnesota, in Minneapolis to be exact. And so this is an article that came through my email, and I thought it was interesting and it was timely. And so I am going to, and it definitely has everything to do with television. So that's why we're going here. In an unusual move, Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, HBO, Starz, and other major Hollywood players are using their corporate social media accounts to take a stand and support the Black Lives Matter movement amid the ongoing nationwide protests decrying the death of George Floyd at the hands of police officers. Meanwhile, CEO of Viacom CBS-owned Paramount, George Giannopoulos, sent an internal memo to employees expressing that, quote, too many members of the black community have had their breath stolen from them through racial injustice, end quote. Netflix tweeted on Saturday afternoon, quote, to be silent is to be complicit. Black Lives Matter. We have a platform and we have a duty to our black members, employees, creators, and talent to speak up, end quote. The move drew accolades on the platform, including from director Ava DuVernay and Orange is the New Black and Ms. America star Uzo Aduba. And Alphabet-owned YouTube on Friday posted that, quote, we stand in solidarity against racism and violence. When members of our community hurt, we all hurt. We're pledging $1 million in support of efforts to address social injustice, end quote. A number of other entertainment brands have followed suit as of Saturday night, as protests have gained momentum throughout the nation, now in their fifth day. Notably, Disney-owned Hulu tweeted and posted on Instagram the message that, quote, we support Black lives, today and every day. You are seen, you are heard, and we are with you, end quote. No other Disney corporate brands appeared to have issued statements on the matter. Several Warner Media Entertainment brands' social media accounts joined the support. HBO, HBO Max, TBS, TNT all changed their Twitter handles to hashtag Black Lives Matter. Amazon Studios posted on Twitter and Instagram that, quote, together we stand with the black community, colleagues, artists, writers, storytellers, producers, our viewers, and all allies in the fight against racism and injustice, end quote. Lionsgate-owned Starz also lent its corporate voice to the cause. Quote, we cannot stand silent while our black communities under the weight of violence, discrimination, and injustice, wrote Starz on Instagram. Color of Change and the NAACP are among the organizations taking the lead in the fight for racial justice in America. We support them in their mission, and you can too. That's all from Starz. Quibi changed its Twitter bio to read, quote, we stand together against injustice, hashtag Black Lives Matter, end quote. Social media platforms also echoed that support for the movement, with Twitter changing its bio to simply read hashtag Black Lives Matter, and TikTok issuing the following statement, quote, at TikTok, we deeply value the diverse voices among our users, creators, artists, partners, and employees. We stand with the black community and are proud to provide a platform where hashtag Black Lives Matter and hashtag George Floyd generate powerful and important views with over 1 billion views. We are committed to fostering a space where everyone is seen and heard, end quote. Twitch similarly posted a statement. Quote, black people have been suffering under the oppressive weight of racism in America for far too long. We cannot delight in the creative contributions of the black community on Twitch and remain silent while they are in pain. We're asking you to come together to stand up for black lives, whether it's through your time, treasure, or talent. Don't let today's injustice stop us from creating a better tomorrow for our community, end quote. So, as you can see, in almost a unified voice, basically the entire streaming community has gotten behind this movement. Now, when I say the entire, obviously there are some people that were not on this list or some organizations or companies that weren't on this list. I don't know if they made statements or not. This is from a breaking email article that I got from Variety.com, and that's why I'm reading it now. This was quite striking to me because we live in a time where we hear about a lot of things. As I've mentioned on this show before, I am probably older than quite a bit of few of my listeners. I am grew up in the late 60s, early 70s, and way before social media, way before cell phones, before cable, as a matter of fact. And so today, before the 24-hour news cycle. So there's been a lot of injustice that's happened worldwide, but we didn't hear about it as quickly and as frequently as we do right now. And so this generation, I'll call it within the last 15 years, and definitely within the last 5 years, we have seen these happenings, people being killed at the hands of law enforcement, hate crimes, bullying, terrorism, all these different things happening when they happen, like in real time, back to back to back. Now, I am here to tell you that those things happened in not maybe some of the terrorism and stuff, but certainly some of the racial injustice and bullying happened with the same frequency when I was growing up, but it just did not, and it didn't happen directly to me. So I'm not here to tell you that, I know about it because it happened to me. I do know people because I'm related to them who it happened to. And so, and we heard about it, but it was in a delayed way. So there was never, I'm telling you all this because there was never a time that I can recall where, even during the civil rights movement, where media companies decided to make a statement like this. We had newspapers that did things like this, like the New York Times would make a statement, or the Washington Post, or some of the larger major national newspapers, Chicago Tribune. They would make political statements. Their boards would have something to say about this particular issue and that issue. But this is a time when I've never seen this before, frankly. And so I'm going to call this a good thing. I know that there are probably some listeners out there who see the other side and don't agree with what's going on right now. I don't agree with the violence. I'll tell you that much. I understand where it's coming from, though. I empathize where it's coming from. I don't agree with the tactic. But this is the first time I have seen, because this is a very public, when you say stuff on Twitter, which I wish some folks, especially those people who hold political office, would understand more clearly. When you say something on Twitter, you are literally going to the highest steeple in the world and saying something you're going to have to own. And while I laud and I am very impressed in a big way that these media companies publicly took this stand, media companies weren't as brave, and this takes some, they used to just opt out of this type of statement. At the time, say Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, news organizations just reported that story. You didn't have media companies coming out and making statements about how terrible a situation that was because they were scared of alienating those people who didn't agree with Martin Luther King's message. And there are people who don't agree with this message. Not the one I'm giving, but maybe the one I'm giving too, but the Black Lives Matter message. So I just thought this was a significant thing to bring up because this is a television podcast, and I am going to say that this is a very positive thing that I hope will help unify the country. Because really, don't we all just want to binge shows and watch analysis of those shows on YouTube and listen to podcasts like mine where we talk about them? That's a perfect world. So let's work toward that. And that's all I have to say about that. Next, we will be going over the latest episode of Billions on Showtime. So go get yourself whatever refreshments you like, freshen up that drink, and I'll be back with Bobby Axelrod right after this.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
All right, here we are. You ready? Okay, billions, y'all. All right, if you haven't watched this episode 5 of season 5, please pause this, go watch it, because I'm going to give a real quick recap of kind of a blow-by-blow of what happened, and then if I have time, I will tell you a little bit about what I thought about this episode. This episode is called Contract, and the fathers and son theme is strong this season in Billions, with Contract getting the heart of why Axe bailed on dinner at his Yonkers childhood home last week. And Chuck is being tasked with saving his father's life at the end. So in both cases, the audience is asked to once again look at the humanity beneath the monster and search for empathy, which is kind of hard this show. The long-term damage that Axe's unnamed father causes is indisputable. We need no further proof than Damian Lewis's voice cracking on a single line of dialogue when confronting his mother, Laurel, over Papa Axelrod's Yonkers reappearance. But while that explains much of Axe's heartless actions through the years, does it excuse it? No. A similar question goes for Chuck Sr. Now he's played by Jeffrey DeMunn. Will his hospital bed acting at the end of this be enough to win both Chuck and the audience over to Senior's lifetime of aberrant behavior? Well, the Vito Corleone-esque collapse on the floor while playing with his baby girl will certainly help his sympathy with the audience, because it was a pretty good scene, but it's kind of a reach. But I'm getting ahead of myself, okay? So let me start at the beginning. Before Chuck Sr. is rushed to the hospital with renal failure in the episode's final act, Chuck spends most of Contract preventing Axe from obtaining his bank charter, which he does in the most Billions way possible. All right, try to keep up with this. The woman who stands between Axe and his bank is one Leah Calder, played by Wendy Malick, who, by the way, is another television crush of mine from decades past. I was really happy to see her show up in this episode. She is the person who will make the call on whether Axe gets this bank charter. Well, she's upset because she wants her son's ex-fiancé to return the diamond ring that her father smuggled out of Hitler's Germany. So all Chuck needs to do is to persuade Brian Connery's safe-cracking brother, this guy named Jackie, who is played by Michael Raymond James, excellent actor who I know from True Blood, to get the ring out of the ex-fiancé's apartment. And Bobby Axelrod will never own a bank in the state of New York. So if Chuck can help her get this ring back, she's going to block Axe from getting his bank charter. Well, it doesn't take much to get Jackie on board, the safecracker, considering Chuck offers him a pretty sweet deal. His brother Brian, who you remember used to be in the DA's office with Chuck, who went to jail last season, will be transferred to a closer, cushier prison, and Jackie won't be arrested for Grand Theft Auto, which they saw him about to do because he was casing a Bugatti showroom. Before fulfilling his end of the bargain, though, Jackie has one reasonable request for Chuck. And he said Chuck has to pay a visit to his brother Brian in jail. So he does so. Now, Toby Leonard Moore is the actor who plays Brian from day one in the series. He did a really great job. And in something I've never seen before, which is played really well, in a wordless cameo, he just comes in there and punches Paul Giamatti in the face. So it was a really great scene. But anyway, that was what he wanted. So Chuck, he's going to go get the ring for Chuck. Meanwhile, Chuck's new relationship with Juliana Margulies is moving along nicely. Her name is Kat, and Kat enthusiastically embraces the Rhodes family drama, with both parties engaging in an open dialogue over their sexual proclivities. Now, while Kat told Chuck that she's down for the BDSM, she insists that it not be the only modality of sex, and that's the word they use, that they explore. But listen, I gotta admit, the sex scene with Paul Giamatti and Juliana Margulies is something that I can never unsee. Ew. And I just didn't need to see that. I didn't need to see it. It's short, thank God, but it was unnecessary, if you ask me. All right, on to Wendy Rhodes. She is working with Taylor Mason to change Taylor Mason Capital to a green company, Taylor Mason Carbon. And Wendy and Taylor start this impact fund, which seems to be a success. Now, there's a little friction from Taylor Mason Capital employees, her previous company, from Lauren and McPhee, who used to work with Wendy and Axe and knows that Wendy can use people, and this guy Winston, who's just a twerp. But anyway, they're suspicious because they think Wendy is trying to work Taylor to try to get leverage over her and help Axe out, who they feel she's ultimately loyal to. And they have a right to be worried, because that's how they got in there in the first place, is that they became part of Axe Capital in the first place because Wendy did a little flip dip on Taylor. But Wendy is very good at what she does, and she brings in this hotshot new analyst named Rian, who is played by Eva Victor, who is a Instagram sensation, apparently. She's a very interesting actress. And so it looks like the Wendy and Taylor thing is going to work. Now, Lauren, who is sort of Taylor's right hand, also, I think they have a little love interest going on. She tells Taylor, in no uncertain terms, that she does not trust Wendy. And Taylor decides not only to trust Wendy, but she's going to make her almost a 50% partner. She offers her 40% of Taylor Mason Carbon. Since Taylor knows the depths of Wendy's shady tactics, I have to believe that she knows what's up, and she's about 2 or 3 steps ahead of this. But anyway, they're partners for all intents and purposes now. As for Axe, he's dealing with the bad optics of abandoning Savion and his mother for dinner in Yonkers. Remember, at the end of last episode, he didn't show up for the dinner that he had planned to have. And then there's a reporter that's gearing up to do a hit piece on Axe, and Axe is worried that Savion is going to tell this reporter that he is a fraud. So over a game of pool, Axe schools Savion on the concept of the following local code. Don't shoot off your mouth about what a terrible person Axe is, even if he did use you to get that opportunity zone, especially if you're going to accept the wad of $100 bills he's laying down on the pool table. Axe introduces him to the concept of contract, not a paper contract, but contract meaning an agreement between men, an honorable agreement, which Savion, to his credit, tells Axe, you obviously don't live up to it because you didn't come to dinner. You just used me, so he doesn't fall for it. We do learn later on in the episode that one of the main reasons Axe didn't go to that dinner was not because he was using Savion, although he was using him for a particular end. That house held bad memories for him, his abusive father. We come to find out later on. This whole thing ends up that he can impart some wisdom to Savion, because in the end, the teen does not talk to the reporter that wants to do the hit piece on Axe. It essentially kills the story, and in gratitude, Axe purchases his old home and finances a move for Savion and his mother to move to affluent Scarsdale. He also advises Savion not to let his dad back in his life when he inevitably returns looking for a handout, because he will now that they're living in a debt-free situation in a New York suburb. Axe obviously has a deep hatred for his father, which comes to light in a very graphic way at the end of this episode, which I'm not going to get into. I only have a little time left, so I just want to mention a few things about this episode. It was an above-average episode. It was typical Billions. But like I said last week, it's kind of crazy how this show telegraphs within 60 seconds of a male and female character meeting each other that they will be boning before the end of the season. And that has happened twice already. And now it looks like Sackler is going to be boning Brian's brother, the safecracker, which is just ridiculous, I think. And it's unnecessary. I don't know why they need to throw that in there. I understand it's a TV show, and I understand that it's somewhat of a soap, so you have to have sex in there somewhere. But it just seems very unlikely that this Harvard-educated assistant DA who's going to run for Congress later on, that's what she said, is going to start screwing around with this safecracker ex-con. Makes no sense at all. But I guess that's why we watch these shows, isn't it? So anyway, that's it for my recap of Billions. I want to thank you all for listening. That's it for this episode of the GSMC Television Podcast. We're part of the mighty GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like you to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you will, please subscribe to the show. I think you'll like, if you listen to it regularly, you might as well, so it gets up on your feed. It helps us grow. And please, if you would, rate us. That helps us even more. Listen, we have a lot of stuff going on right now in the country, but I don't want you to forget that we are in the middle of a global pandemic. So please be careful. Please be safe. Wash your hands. Try not to get too close to people if you can. I'm a big proponent of mask wearing. I think you should wear a mask if you can. Besides, if something happens to you, you can't listen to my show. My name is Howard Fletcher. I'm here with Jack the Black Pug. I love you guys. See you next time. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Television Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.